This is the drum pad game. The A, B, X, and Y buttons have been programmed to play sound effects, while the shoulder buttons control the background music. While visuals usually get the most attention of gamers, sound is one of the most important parts of a game. Just try playing a game on mute to see how influential sound is. In this tutorial, you'll learn how to load, play, and control sounds from WAV, MP3, and WMA files. You'll also learn when to choose between the sound effect and song classes when playing a sound. Let's create a new project and call it DrumPad. New project. It's going to be a Windows game for XNA 4.0. Call it DrumPad. Great. Well, to play sounds, you need to actually have sounds. And you can find the sound resources we'll use in this video located in the lesson folder or the curriculum appendix. These sound effects are WAV files. WAV stands for Waveform Audio File Format and usually is used to hold uncompressed audio data. Let's add some sounds to our project. Go to DrumPad Content and add existing item. Now navigate to the folder containing your sounds. Here they are. You can add them all at the same time by holding the control button and clicking on them successively. And now you can add. See how they show up under the content on the right? Go ahead and pause this tutorial and add your audio. Now let's get the files ready to be used in our code. We'll use the same procedure we've used when loading images and fonts, which is to create a variable to hold the loaded content, initialize the variable in the load content method, and use the resource in the game. Let's go to the top of the program and create sound effect variables to refer to the 4 drum sounds we'll be playing. The sound effect class is used when dealing with WAV files. In fact, WAV files can only be played as sound effect objects. Here I'm going to create cymbal ting. And I'm also going to create a sound effect kick. A sound effect snare, and a top for the top hat. Later in this video, we'll learn how to play MP3 files and WMA files using the media player and song classes. Now we'll need to go to the load content method and load the files. Do this the same way you loaded fonts and images. In this case, we're loading a sound effect. Make sure you spell the name of the file correctly. Awesome. Go ahead and pause and create your variables and load the content. Now we're going to set gamepad buttons to play the sounds. Let's create a gamepad state variable at the top of the program. Now let's go to the update method and set pad 1 to the state of the player 1 controller. Wonderful. Well, we can change the exit code to reflect pad 1 now. Cool. Now what we want to do is, if the A button is pressed, we'll play the snare. If pad1 dot buttons dot A is equal to button state dot pressed, snare dot play. Here you see, you just tell the sound effect to play and it will play. Great. Well, go ahead and add those pieces to your code. And the next thing we'll do is run the code. Alright, well, let's run this code and see what happens. And I'll press the A button. Well, that didn't work out. What's going on here is that the sound is being told to play at a rate of 60 times a second for however long we hold down the A button. Unless someone can press the A button for only 1/60th of a second, which could actually be the basis of a future game, we need to use the edge detection code learned in the previous lesson. Let's go back to the top of the Game 1 class and create another gamepad state variable called oldPad1. Did you know that you could declare two variables on the same line if they're of the same type? It's really cool. Now, let's go back to the update method and change the condition under which we play the snare sound. Currently, it's just looking for the A button. What we need to do is look if the A button was previously released. So, let's add some code. And there we go, that familiar edge detection code that we've seen before. The last thing we need to do is record the current gamepad state for the next call of update. Alright, this would be a great time to type up your code, and then we'll see what happens. Alright, well, let's run it. And I'll press the A button. Alright, great. Well, go ahead and set the B, X, and Y buttons to play the other sounds. We've played some sound effects and controlled them using gamepad buttons. Now let's add some background music. Create another sound effect variable at the top of the program and call it music. To set, pause, play, and loop the music, we'll need to use the sound effect instance class to control the music. Note, the sound effect instance class has been modified with the change from XNA version 3.1 to the current XNA version 4.0. Let's create a sound effect instance variable as well. And we'll call this music instance. Now we'll add the music resource to our content folder. Right-click, add, existing item, and here I am. I've already navigated to my lesson resources, and I'm going to click on music and add it. Next thing I'll do is I'll load it in the load content method. Music equal to, and I'm going to copy this and simply change top to music, and we're done. Go ahead and pause this and add this code to your program. Now we need to go to the update code. Let's write the code to edge detect a press of the left shoulder button. And what I want to do is I want to tell the music instance to play. Looks a lot like the sound effect instance class usage, looks a lot like the sound effect class usage, but with a couple differences. We can't play a music instance if we don't have a music instance yet. We get a sound effect instance from the sound effect class by calling create instance. Now, we don't need to do this every time we play the music instance variable, just the first time the user wants to play music instance. Let's set up a conditional to see if music instance is null, and if it is, then we'll construct it, set it to loop, and play. Otherwise, if it has been previously constructed, we'll just play it. Right here, go ahead and check if the music instance is equal to null, which it should be at the beginning of the program because it hasn't been constructed yet. And if it is null, the first thing we want to do is get the music instance from the music variable. So we'll say music instance is equal to music dot create instance. And so what happens here is that the sound effect music is creating an instance of itself and giving that to the sound effect instance variable music instance. In addition, we'll set the music instance to loop. So we'll say music instance dot is looped, the is looped property. We'll set it to true. And we'll go ahead and play the music instance that first time as well. Otherwise, if the music instance has already been played before, that means it's already been constructed. We'll just go ahead and play it. And there we go. If the left shoulder button is pressed and the sound effect instance has not been initialized yet, meaning that it's null, then we initialize the sound effect instance, tell it that it is looped, and then play it. If the sound effect instance has been previously initialized, then we just play it. Did you see how IntelliSense is used to find other things you can do with the music instance? In fact, if you wanted to find it out, you could type in music instance dot and take a look at all the different things you can change about a music instance. The pitch, you can pan it, and you can even change the volume. These are all things you can do with the sound effect object music instance. And then we'll delete this because we don't need that. The power of IntelliSense, I love it. This would be a great place to pause and write the code to use the left shoulder button to play the music instance. Alright, well next we have to set the right shoulder button to pause the music instance. We'll use edge detection again. In this case, I'll just copy and paste this if statement right here and put it right there. Instead of left shoulder, I'm going to change it to right shoulder, and right shoulder over here as well. Awesome. And I want the right shoulder to control the pausing. So I'll say music instance dot pause. Awesome. Excellent. There we go. So let's go ahead and run it and see the pause in action. Press F5. And I'm going to go ahead and press pause, and Something doesn't seem to be working correctly. Ooh, a null reference exception. Now, I know it's weird to try to pause the music even though it's not playing already, but it's a very good programming practice to address all the possible ways a program could fail. Why did we get a null reference exception? Pause the tutorial, look at the code, and try to figure it out. Well, we get a null reference exception because we tried to pause the music instance before it was even initialized. Remember, the first time you play the music instance, it gets constructed. So if you try to pause before it actually was played, it was never constructed. A null reference exception occurs when an object that has not been constructed is attempted to be accessed. It's as if I were to tell my dog Spot to roll over, but I don't have a dog. Yeah, that's just weird. And that is just what a null reference exception is trying to tell us. We did not construct the sound effect instance object yet because that would have been caused by pressing the left shoulder button first, and we didn't do that. So our program ends up throwing an exception. We should only pause if the music instance is not null. We don't need an else condition because if it is null, then there's nothing to pause anyway. So to get out of this, press Shift F5, and we're going to set up an if statement right here. If music instance is not equal to null, then I'll go ahead and allow the music instance to be paused. There we go. Let's go ahead and run it and see what happens. And I press the pause button and it doesn't blow up. But I press the left shoulder button and some nice funky music. All right. And then I pause it. Play. Pause. Play. Pause. Play. Pause. I think you get the idea. Alright, well, now you know how to play sounds using the sound effect class and the sound effect instance class. And you know how to play short little sound effects as well as background music. You also know how to loop the music and control the music by playing it and pausing it. Well, what happens if you want to play longer music files, like full songs? And what if you don't have WAV files? Let's say you have MP3 and WMA files, very popular audio file formats. Well, in that case, you're going to have to use the media player and song classes. And that's what we'll look at next. WAV files and the sound effect class are great when dealing with short sounds, but as the sound sample gets longer, like with songs, the sound data file takes up too much program memory. For example, the music.wav file takes about 20 plus megabytes of memory, and that's actually on the smaller side of things. The longer the WAV file, the bigger it gets. So if you want to play a song, you probably don't want to use a WAV file. Instead, you might want to use an MP3 or WMA file. So let's first add the song content to our content folder. Right-click, Add, Existing Item, and here I'm going to pick Song. And actually, Song is just an MP3 version of the music.wav file. So it's actually going to sound the same, but the MP3 file is compressed. So instead of taking something like 20-something megabytes, the song.mp3 file takes up only 2 megabytes. Let's go ahead and create a song variable up at the top, and we'll call it song, or we can call it tune. Let's call it tune. And let's load our tune. I'll copy this and paste it here because I'm lazy and that's what programmers do. And instead of loading a sound effect, I'm going to load a song. And it's not called music, it's called tune. Oh, actually it's called song. You gotta be careful with that. Alright, this would be a great place to pause and go ahead and add that code to your program. Great. Now let's control the song using the left and right shoulder buttons like we did for the sound effect instance. The left shoulder will play the song and resume it from a pause state. Let's go down here. Here's the left shoulder. And it's going to be a little bit neater than this. Let's change this to media player dot state, and we'll check if the state of the media player is paused. And if it's paused, we'll tell the media player to resume. Otherwise, we will play the tune using the media player. So here you see the media player in action. Gotta change this to media player. Great. So the media player class is used when we want to play a song. And a song class is used when we want to pull in an MP3 or WMA file, and we usually want a WMA file or an MP3 file when we want to play a longer sound file, just because a WAV file would take too much space. Alright, and we need to work with the right shoulder code. And basically, if the media player state is equal to media state dot playing, we will pause the media player. So it's really important to check the media player state before we tell it to resume, play, or pause, because we don't want the media player to get mixed up. So only if the media player is currently playing and we press the right shoulder button should we pause it. Great. Let's go ahead and run the code and see what happens. Great. Well, basically the exact same thing as before, except we used an MP3 file and we use a lot less space with that file. As an extension exercise, try creating a game in which people have to play notes in a certain order. Or try a name that tune kind of game where people have to guess a song with only a short clip of the song played. You could also set up a list of songs to play and create your own music player. In this video, you learned how to load, play, and control sounds from WAV, MP3, and WMA files. You also learned how to use the sound effect and song classes to play music. Sound effects and music are such an important part of a game. Xbox 360 games have teams of people just to work on the sounds.